Okay. Welcome, everybody, to our another webinar series where we uncover successful leaders, playbooks, strategies, or techniques. Together with me, I have my co-host and colleague, Bart. Bart, how are you today?
Yeah, it's good. Happy to do it again. It was some time ago, so really was looking forward to it.
Yeah, it was, the Christmas time always makes it a little bit more complicated to schedule the things. And also, our today's host is Will Taylor, who leads partnership at Nearbound.com and Reveal Co. Um, so, how are you, Will, today?
Doing well. Yeah, I'm excited for the chat today, and I'm feeling good. Quick start to the year, and business is in an interesting state, but we're going to be talking about that today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually the topic of today. We all heard the buzz on the social media and in the SaaS industry that the predictable revenue model seems to be dead, and that investing into the line assembly of production in sales, you have BDRs that schedule meetings, you have account executives that go after, you have defined verticals, you chase them, and you measure the numbers, stops being the most successful strategies. And as the one of the potential new go-to-market is being Nearbound is being considered as one of the potential strategies to go to the market, and that's today why we are here. Our goal, is to discuss firstly what the Nearbound is about, why it is important to discuss it, and actually what are the approaches and experience we all have, and especially Will has with Nearbound. Before we dive in, Will, can you briefly introduce or tell us a bit more about the Nearbound? What is that about? And actually how Reveal fits into that?
Absolutely. So, Nearbound, simply put, is the go-to-market strategy that helps businesses to surround their prospective buyers. Inbound is focused on bringing the buyers to you. Outbound is going to the buyers. Nearbound is surrounding those buyers with the existing relationships they already have. And so Reveal is a tool that allows for understanding of those people or organizations that already have those trusted relationships. Who should we work with? How should we work with them? And which accounts should we actually target with them as well? So which of those buyers are actually working with those trusted relationships that exist in the ecosystem? And technically, it is an account mapping tool. It allows you to take your customer or prospect list and you can overlap it with another organization's customer or prospect list. And then you can identify what are the commonalities and who should we talk to based on who I want to target and who you already work with.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. I really like that when I saw that for the first time, because I was thinking, how did you tackle the Nearbound? And this is very, in a way, like easy thing to do, but very powerful, right?
Yeah, and it's definitely not something new necessarily. It's just becoming more and more formalized in business. So, everyone always worked on trusted relationships and referrals and their network and all of that. But it wasn't a forced function in a business because you could do the predictable revenue model. You didn't have to rely on the network. But based on some of the changes in the socioeconomic climate, there is this forcing function now. And that's why technologies like Reveal and methodologies like Nearbound have come into the light. Because when people look to like, what else can we do? We look back to what has worked, but we need to apply a business process to it. And that's what Nearbound does.
Yeah, pretty much.
Would, would you say, would you say, Will, that it's in every industry also that you see it, or are you more like targeting specific industries or like?
Yeah, every industry, because where there's humans, there's relationships, and that means you can tap into those networks of trust. Because even if it's a less like social media active industry like IT or cybersecurity or some of the more traditional industries, there's still going to be handshakes being done, steak dinners being had, events that people go to, and people that are being listened to and trusted in the market. So it's definitely industry agnostic because it applies wherever there's human relationships.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe if we can go one step back, and that is like the outbound, because we discussed it might be changing or it is changing. What is your perspective on that? Why is that happening, and what could be the future?
So there's a lot of different factors, and I can take it from a 30,000 foot view all the way down to the individual. I'll keep the 30,000 foot view as brief as possible, but essentially what we're seeing is there's more and more companies in the market today where it's easier than ever to start a business because you can spin up a website in less than an hour. You can use AI to code something for you. So there's already so many businesses that are being made week over week, month over month. And what that means is there's even more noise when those businesses try to reach the market that they're trying to serve. And it's very different from even 3-4 years ago, where we didn't have this challenge. Businesses were easier to stand up, but it's only accelerated even faster now, where in the previous time you would have one company that would have maybe 5, maybe 10 competitors, but now you're seeing 15, 20, upwards of 25 or more competitors. And so if they're all trying to eat up all the same mind share of the market and market to individuals and do sales outreach to these other companies, there's only going to be more noise, not only in the inbox, but also in the greater ecosphere that these people play within, from SEO to ads to the email inbox to all those cold calls that are being done. And so not only from a business perspective is it being cluttered, but there's also indicators in the market across even the political sphere where fake news was a huge thing. Where how do we know who to trust? And podcasting has risen as a very popular medium because it's less of this faceless corporation or this company, and it's more of this individual. We've seen that in the consumer side as well, where the influencer economy has expanded, and that's also tapping into the B2B space now. And so all this is pointing towards this chaos of so much noise. And we describe it at nearbound.com as we were in a how economy previously, where people were searching on Google, how do I do this thing? But now there's so much good information out there about how to do a thing that it's all been repurposed. And so now we're looking to who can I actually trust? So we're now moving to a who economy. We're looking at the individuals. We're focusing on our trusted relationships. And so that's from the macro perspective. But even from the micro perspective, if you think about the individual themselves, the individual, at least in North America or primarily in the USA, they're receiving thousands of ads a day. And we write about the stat where I think it goes up to about 40,000 ads being thrown at them every day, whether it's on the road that they're driving on their phone that they're scrolling through. And so there's an onslaught of information for the individual. And what we do is we're going to retreat into ourselves and say, I'm just not going to respond to that email, or I'm going to, and I do this with my social media, I'm going to put a blocker on my social media that stops me from scrolling, because again, everything is so good. TikTok, Instagram, the content that businesses are producing, it's so good, but there's so much of it and we don't know how to weed through all of it. And so that's why there's this emergence of the partnership strategy and things like Nearbound, because we are holding our trust credits closer to ourselves, where before we could trust in establishments, but now there's less trust in those establishments, and we now rely more on the relationships that we have. And so the state of Outbound is you can't just keep scaling something with AI and increasing the volume, because you're just going to add to that noise. And if people are not even opening emails, then why would you just try and send more emails? Or if there's technology implemented to block, cold calls, or there's even a tool called Gated, and it's an email tool that basically creates a gate for anyone who's emailing you to donate to a fundraiser or to a charity, which is, nice in theory, but like we have to build software to stop people from emailing us because we're getting too many emails. And even, the larger organizations like Apple and Google are starting to block this in their email servers, where, Google is making some changes for the email domains, and, domain reputation is a thing as well. So it's this giant shift. And, the reason those large organizations are doing that is because the market is demanding it. And people are fed up with, the more traditional, more spammy outreach. And not all outbound is spammy, but it requires higher quality, and that's where people then look to those trust credits being spent more conservatively.
And if you like things will, I immediately imagine these 40,000 ads driving everywhere, seeing it on social media and things like that. I think, yeah, it is really a lot. And I know that a lot of organizations in the past, one of the things that they could do is do some personalization, and then you get the feeling it was a bit closer to your, let's say, interest, but it's still like throwing all these ads and stuff to you. But now let's say, I think most of the organizations at least realize in some shape or form that tactic is not working. But how do they then get started? Like how would you then like build your network and actually create be that one email that gets passed through the gate?
Yeah, so Scott Leese talks about this a lot on LinkedIn, where he talks about this go-to-network strategy, which is within the ethos of Nearbound. And what he talks about is building a network, and that means genuinely engaging in communities or creating individual content, and really just trying to be that trusted advisor and that expert in that space. And so what we saw previously was, way back, it was sellers who were actually experts. We trusted the seller, maybe for a time we trusted the car salesperson, but that quickly got a little bit slimy, which is the theme that a lot of people then started to see the seller as, where if we think about the, scalable model, it was a person, typically more junior, doing this outreach to individuals who are typically decision makers, or at least they're trying to. And so again, it worked for as long as it did, but now people are realizing, well, why would I listen to a person who has no experience in this field when I could listen to someone who does? And so the people who are standing out are the individuals who are building a network by genuinely connecting with people, not having an agenda in the conversations that they have or in the content that they produce. And again, going back to that influencer economy, there's a reason why B2B influencers are on the rise, is because they're doing that same thing where they're building this expertise, they're becoming this trusted advisor. And so what I would say for any individual who is, let's say, doing outbound today, I would say that if you want to stand out from that noise, then one way to do it without having a massive network already is to actively try and build that in the communities that you aim to serve. So maybe it's an online community, maybe it's on social media, maybe it's local events that you can go to. Start building your expertise and sharing your opinion as well, because then you could potentially actually teach something to the people that you're trying to reach, and that's going to gain their trust. And so, it's definitely easier said than done, because a lot of companies have tried to build this social media brand with their SDRs, and no one, or not no one, but few of them are actually motivated to do these things. But in reality, if you want to be a successful seller, you have to be someone who can be this trusted advisor. And this is not to say that you need to know everything. And that's where this idea of Nearbound can come in, where as you're starting to build your network, if you are looking through the network effects of this person knows this other person, and maybe there's one person who knows a bunch of people, then why not try and network with that person so that you can leverage their existing trust? And you don't necessarily have to be the trusted advisor at that point. You'll know a bit, but you'll also be able to tap the people that can actually help the prospect, and that's going to gain you trust. So it's definitely, again, not you can do it tomorrow kind of thing. It's not a sequence that you can just implement. It is something that is built over time, but that's where you can gain trust, and people will start spending their trust credits with you.
Yeah, I'll definitely. It tickles a lot more questions, but I know that then Jacob will jump in. Am I allowed to ask one follow-up question, Jacob?
Well, I just wanted to wrap up what we discussed. Like the trends on the market is that we have plenty of ads attacking the people. More of the salespeople in place. Moreover, also salespeople are equipped with more advanced tools. So before that, they were able to make free calls. Now they can make 30 calls because they use power dialers. Before that, they send out 20 emails. Now they can send out 200 emails per day because they use multiple inboxes. And for personalization, they're starting adapting the AI, which results that people start getting overwhelmed with that. So that's pretty much what's happening on the market. And yeah, before that it was accepted because the economy was growing, especially in SaaS. But since 2022, 2023, when the economy slowed down, this model also slows down. And yeah, this is I think we as salespeople over-engineer that a little bit, and our reaction if something doesn't work, so let's send out more and call more, brings that we need to change the paradigm a little bit. So, and there we are with Nearbound. So that's what I wanted to wrap up as your points which you mentioned.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's exactly it.
And if I then I'll still do my follow-up question a little bit here. Thanks, Jacob. You know we Dutch guys, but so I think also people try to look a little bit for the magic button now. They obviously and when I listen to you when you explain it, also when you build your thought leadership and your network, then it can take a lot of time to actually build that, create the credibility, grow your network. So how would you say if companies want to do a bit of the turnaround, are there some, let's say, tips and tricks or ideas or best practices where they can accelerate that journey a bit into, let's say, working with a more Nearbound model?
Yes, and I'll preface this with the fact that, in the old world, we were able to move fast and get those short-term gains because capital was available to spend on, increasing the customer acquisition cost and spending on it because the money was available. And so the Nearbound methodology is definitely more of a long-term strategy. So if a business is just in it to make money in the next 6 months and then, maybe sell their company in 3, 4, or 5 years, then okay, yeah, you can try and burn a bunch of cash and get there. But if you're trying to be, a Google or a Facebook or a Shopify or a HubSpot or, those companies that have gone public and that are still going strong, if you look at all of those companies, they have a partnership strategy. So, how do you get started though is the biggest challenge is in all of this, you may be thinking, well, where do I start? Like, how do I wrap my head around the, either physical location or the location that I'm spending my time even networking? That's where identifying these partners in your space can help you figure out where you should be in the ecosystem. And you can think of it as nodes in this larger ecosystem that you are in. And there's going to be clusters of a bunch of buyers over here, maybe a smaller bunch of buyers over here, maybe there's a really big one over here. But if you're, down here in the little corner and you're not really connected with any of these other companies or individuals in these clusters of nodes, then you're going to be on an island and you're going to need to do the same things that you've been doing. And so how do you actually navigate that? Well, the best way to do this is truly looking at who your customer is already engaging with. Everything should always be about the customer. It should not be about your business growth alone. That's obviously important, but the customer is your boss. And that's something that Jill Rowley talks about as well, where you should work for the customer. And so if you're thinking about the customer's world, what technologies do they already use? Even if it's not integrated with your technology, what's surrounding it? The person that I'm trying to sell to, what does their day-to-day look like? Who are they listening to? What influencers do they follow? What podcasts do they listen to? And this thought process will guide you to identify, well, maybe a lot of our clients use HubSpot. So maybe we should go to the HubSpot ecosystem and be in that ecosystem, engage with other technologies that also engage with HubSpot. That is the first step, is understand what other technologies do they typically use based on the company that they are and where they're located, the industry, so on and so forth. And then look at the surrounding world around them, because that's going to be different than just thinking, well, I target this type of person in this type of business. That's going to get you somewhere, but if you don't think about the surrounding worlds, you're not going to be able to navigate where you should be positioning yourself. So that thought process is a really good one. In the partnership space, they call it building an ideal partner profile. There's a lot of resources out there to look into that and go through the logic of building that for your business. And then the other piece is, and this is where, tools like Reveal come in, where when you connect with these partners and you start to do something like account mapping, you can see how much do we actually overlap. So you've identified the companies or organizations that you can work with. Now you can actually overlap the business behind it, their customers, your prospects, what's the business potential, and that'll bring you focus. And so it's not necessary, but it's a really great first step to identify who are the ideal people or customer or technologies that we could work with already today that already work with our customers. Great. Here's this short list of, 15, 20 or so. Awesome. Now I can start mobilizing my people to network in this area versus either alone or trying to go everywhere. And then you can apply some business process behind it with a more formal partnerships program, essentially.
Thanks.
Yeah. But what we're discussing right now is just one of the way how to do Nearbound, right? Because what I hear from you is, hey, doing the prioritization just based on who is your ICP is not enough. Because looking at the company from the perspective, was that for geo, industry, how many employees they have, and other parameters which you can search. But also you need to put there a bit of like, how can I get close, or did I get closer to some of them, or the brand I'm working for, the company I'm working for, did the company get closer to them? So the ICPs then become prioritized. Can somebody connect me there? That's like what you discussed. But also, did they come to my webinar, or did they follow me on the LinkedIn, or did they come to my website? So there was some of the brand exposure, I would call it in this way.
Yeah, and I think that's why like intent signals are becoming more popular in the sales space. I know some influencers that are talking about, well, outbound is hard, so what can you do? Well, add in more data to the people that you will be reaching out to actually understand, what technologies are they using? What topics are they finding interesting? What challenges are they actually thinking about and listening to, and maybe even writing about? So those intent signals, whether that's with your website or your marketing content, or if it's market signals, I think those are a good place to start focusing on, and that's why a lot of sellers who are trying to modify their approach are looking there. And so this is just another signal that you can consider of, oh, they use this technology. I should think about that when I bring this conversation towards them to try and help them, because now I'm speaking to their world. It's much more relevant because I use the word HubSpot, and maybe we have an integration, and maybe I know someone there and I can name drop them, and so on and so forth.
And would you also say it's like when you compare it to outbound is in a sense filling the funnel from the top. You just fill it with leads and you go and start working on the leads in a sales process. But what I also hear saying is that Nearbound is much more than that, because it's also a way of working with your partners. It's a longer part of the process, because obviously, let's say your Nearbound approach will also help you to find the right contacts, to get the trusted people, to, let's say, in a much further phase in the process, you're actually using the Nearbound principles to, let's say, win the deal or get closer to the client or get a better account mapping or something like it.
Yes, I would say Nearbound it's not replacing outbound. So I still think you can do outbound and all the activities that are related in outbound. However, it's amplified with a Nearbound idea and a Nearbound mindset, meaning if I'm doing cold outreach to a specific list, then that's great. But if I amplify that with this list also uses XYZ technologies, or listens to ABC influencers or podcasters, or they're in these communities, from there I can layer that into my messaging, and relevancy is immediately increased, because I'm not just giving them a generic message that might land on the problems that they have, but I can speak to their world specifically. So it's as if I know them more. And Sam McKenna talks about show me you know me, which is not just about personalization, it's about relevancy and making sure that you as the seller know my world as a prospect and you can speak to it so that it doesn't feel like it's some automated outreach. And so yeah, in general, Nearbound is this additional strategic layer that amplifies effectively everything from the co-marketing that you do or even your own individual marketing all the way through to closing a deal, including prospecting, demoing even, and of course, closing through like the contracting phase. So it is a layer across the entire business is how I would describe it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it's still it feels like what you're also explaining, that it's in a sense a form of enrichment of the data to be able to do better outbound, if I say it negatively. But what you're also adding to it is that, let's say, that you have a trusted partner or a trusted relation that already has a trusted relation with the client to actually introduce you as another trusted technology. So it's the trust equation that you actually add. Am I right?
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly it. And so, you as a business, you still need to do your own operations, but if you're basically allowing the prospect to hear about you when you're not in the room, that is the most powerful thing that can happen, because it's no longer you advocating for your company to the prospect, it's a partner advocating for you or introducing you or influencing a decision maker. And so there are these plays that amplify it basically when you're not in the room. So to answer your question, yes.
Well, yeah, and then we can actually this, or maybe before we get into the techniques and tactics, because it sounds a little bit to me as account-based sales, so which is already been happening as well. So can you tell me if you see any difference between Nearbound and account-based sales?
Yeah, so the way that I would describe this is all account-based sales are Nearbound related, but not all Nearbound tactics are account-based sales. And what I mean by that is, if you're selling into the account and doing this account-based selling, then you will be implementing certain strategies that are from this Nearbound idea. But Nearbound also expands further than that, meaning you can go outside of the account to then influence from this external, because it could be something as straightforward as their favorite influencer at that account that maybe even they work with in a formal capacity is posting about your tool or your methodology, and that's going to influence them in that account specifically. So it is taking the external and bringing it into the view of this account specifically. Whereas I understand account-based selling as, you're working within basically not the external, it's really just the account itself, and Nearbound layers in this additional external element. Yep.
Okay. So one more question before we get to tactics. You mentioned several times influencers, and influencers in B2B are on the rise. Do you see that actually as a future, that companies instead of BDRs would be getting influencers?
I would say yes, either they are making their own influencers, or the easier path, depending on how they work with that influencer, is working with them externally. I know of a good amount of early stage companies that are bringing them on as advisors, but then also whenever that advisor posts on LinkedIn, they're giving this company exposure, or they could even be on a retainer where they are posting a certain amount of times per month, and it's really just, a cash payout. Or if it's more formal and they have the ability to track it, then they're tracking based on performance. And so I would say that it is definitely a strategy that organizations have started to do where they're paying for posts. But I would say that's more of a short-term mindset where you're just saying, okay, I'm going to pay for this and it's going to incrementally add to our views that we get on our webpage. The better strategy, in my opinion, is going to be working with them in a more strategic fashion where Maybe they are an actual advisor for your business, and it's not just some basic title so that your company gets exposure. Maybe they are advising your business. Maybe they are strategically aligned with you, where they have their own narrative as an influencer and potentially a consultant that they want to bring to the market. If you can align with that as a company, then the content that you create is going to land with both audiences. And so you're going to become more strategically aligned. I would say that's the better way to go about it. But if you think about it, what would I rather spend? Would I rather spend, $60,000 on an SDR or a BDR for a year, and let's assume that they're more junior and they can generate, X amount of leads per month, and that we're going to track them on that? Or should I pay a very small fraction of that cost to an influencer that can get 1 million impressions, so reaching 1 million people, and maybe that converts at a certain rate? I would venture to say that, depending on the reach of that influencer, it would be more cost effective to actually just pay the influencer and work with them than it would be to hire, an SDR specifically. Now, I'm simplifying it. Again, I still believe that you do need to still do outbound, inbound, and all of that. But from the economics of the situation, I would say the reason that more companies are starting to work with influencers and pay for posts and work with them in that fashion is because of that, reach and the conversion that they do see from it. They do see effectiveness, and it is cost effective. And so it's something that a lot of organizations should pay attention to, because it'll only become more and more popular. And again, I'm seeing it especially for those early stage companies where it's really hard for them to break out into the greater, ecosystem because they're much smaller.
Yeah, I think it also depends, like, who is your target audience. If you go for the biggest enterprises, then influencers wouldn't have such an impact as if you go after the SMEs, SMBs, where you have thousands or millions of them on the market. Yeah, I love it. Well, talking about how to use the Nearbound, like, how do you personally work with that? Usually, how you get into the deals?
Yeah. So I have one example that is less like formal partnerships, and then I have many examples from the partnerships angle. But the example that I have is I saw at an organization that our team is prospecting to that someone had recently left their role. And we're in the relatively early stage of a deal cycle. We're doing demos, and we know who the decision makers are, but we don't know them too well. We know who they are, but we have never spoken to them, and we don't know how to approach them. So this person that recently left the organization, I noticed that I had worked with them at the same organization in the past. We didn't really talk that much, but just on that commonality, there was a certain level of trust. I asked them, hey, the person that we're talking to is this person. How much buying power do you think they have? They immediately said they have zero buying power. Like, you need to talk to this person and this person. And I said, okay, cool. Like, I would have assumed that based on their roles, but it's good to have that confirmation. But what I also asked was, so what's their perception of partnerships? What do they think of it? And this person said, well, the main decision maker, they said, has absolutely no clue about how to run partnerships effectively. They think they do. And basically the undertone here was this person is, somewhat arrogant. And so they are just thinking of it through this money-making channel, and they have no experience with it. They're just, in a decision-making position. So they're going to kind of like force down this idea of partnerships. And so with that information, I'm now much more armed to approach that person with information that is relevant to them, because I know what kind of person they are like, and I know how they perceive partnerships, which is, again, going to be what our technology helps out with. So here I'm networking with an individual that I have a trusted relationship with that can give me information, and we call this the intel play within Nearbound. And now I'm much more armed to approach any kind of typical sales process that a seller would go through, because I have this external information that is now giving me much more power in the sales process. So intel is a really powerful play. That is an example of, this person's not my partner. It's just a person in my network that I know that I found out that I could tap for this external information that I would otherwise not have. Another example is working with a technology partner. So we have technology partners at Reveal, and it's in the partner tech space. What I do is I won't get too much into the technology, but basically there's a function that allows a seller to say, I want information from this partner. And then it sends it to a shared Slack channel. And in there, what we're doing is we're asking, hey, you work with this person because we have the shared contact. If we didn't, it wouldn't show it. But I want to reach out to this title that you work with today. Here's the context about my situation. Here are the 3 questions that I want to know. And I love asking yes, no questions. I actually wrote about this today on LinkedIn, and I have my templates that I shared for this. And what we gain is very similar information. And an example of how this was successful was one of our sellers was working an opportunity, and they were going, single tracked. It was just them. They were multi-threaded as much as they could in the organization. They were doing account-based sales. But when we had the partner get involved, they said the CEO has this perception of partnerships, and they came from this company. The CRO doesn't like partnerships, so you need to be prepared for that. And what our seller found out was, the CEO actually used to work at a company that already used the free version of the tool. And he didn't know that before, but only from talking to the partner who was also working that account and that opportunity, he found out, the 2 main decision makers that are going to make this purchasing decision have these perceptions and they're different. One of them has a more powerful, more experience-based opinion, and the other is just, stuck in their ways. Now I know how to sell to them. So my upcoming meeting that's, next week that I'm doing a presentation to both of them, I know how to address them. I can change the questions that I ask, and it resulted in a closed-won deal, and the partner was attributed for that influence. So from there, that's another intel play. The introduction play is very straightforward. It's, hey, you work with this person. If they're in good health, I think they'd be a good fit. And, I know they work on these programs. So can I get an introduction? And this is something that's facilitated very frequently within our partnerships, where they then send an email. Hey, prospect, here is this person that I know. You should talk to them because I think it would be valuable. We work with them. So that play is, again, very straightforward, but this information is, again, information that you would otherwise not have if you weren't using this idea of Nearbound in the sales process. Because a lot of sellers, they think, I need to go multi-threaded, which is good, but they're not thinking about who else knows this person.
We should ask you a question now, because you can take a sip of water then.
Yeah.
Thank you. You talk about in both plays, the Intel play and the introduction play. In a sense, it's also, again, a bit about that trust relation that you build with partners. And we talked about it also, Jacob and I, and a couple of other calls that we have. It's a lot about that give and get play. Like you give something, you get something back. So I'm curious, like, especially in Nearbound, it's super important that you build that relation with your partners in your ecosystem. When they jump into the account mapping tool, there's already a certain level of trust. So how do you see that give and get play? So how do you convince them to actually collaborate really in the platform, instead of just like being very careful, sharing just a few clients or a few opportunities, and then like not really moving ahead?
Yeah, so the first way is, of course, you can sign an MNDA, and if it's a formal partnership, then you can sign a partnership agreement, and then that's going to legally formalize it. The other way is, like you mentioned, the give to get. And Jacob, you and I talked about this as well, where it's like, if you give them something like a quote on your blog or invite them to a webinar like this, then it's going to show that, hey, you're really looking out for their best interest, because you're trying to give to them exposure or information that then will allow them to be more successful in their business. So taking that first step is really important. And I always recommend shouting people out on socials, or inviting them to a co-marketing event, or referencing them in a blog. And then from there, starting the discussion to have more of a formal relationship. But I would say at the end of the day, if you ask an organization if what they're doing is successful and scalable from, the more traditional outbound motion, they'll probably say no. And this is the conversation that we have with a lot of CROs, where we kind of back them into a corner where it's like, what else are you going to do if you are just doing things as you normally did? You're either going to overwork your people because they need to do more volume, or you're going to hire more, which is another cost. And so, like, is
It's a
that what
good
you're
sales
going
tactic. We would call that salami tactic in the Netherlands. You just threaten them until they say, okay, in that case, I will buy.
Exactly. And so, like, that's what I would say to others who are more reluctant to do partnering.
Yeah.
But then also at the end of the day, like, especially in our tool, like, the information that's shared, it's GDPR compliant, it's SOC 2 compliant. We're not actually sharing any contact details. We're only sharing account details, and you have a lot of control over that as well. So, I mean, we work with public companies, and HubSpot is one of our customers. And one of the things that they do is they limit the actual overlaps that they're showing to some of their partners, because you can select specific lists and do filtering and whatnot. And so you do have a lot of control over this as well. So even if there's a little bit less trust and you only want to work on a specific short list, then you're able to do that and facilitate it within the technology. And I think that's okay as well. If someone is holding their cards closer to them, that just means that they don't trust you as much, and you need to work to build that trust if you truly do believe it'll be beneficial for the business. So,
so step by step, you grow the trust level with them.
Exactly. And you have control over it as well. And I would say, I mean, if you just open the entire kimono, like, that's going to shock people. So, like, you definitely don't normally just be like, here's everything. It's more in, like, you can consider it like dating, where in dating, you're going to have a slow pace. You're not going to get married on the first date. You get married, after a certain amount of time. The same thing can be said for these relationships as well.
Here, I would like to dive a little bit deeper into the way how to work with Nearbound, because what I want to ask specifically is, what is the daily routine for you and the daily KPI? Because the traditional for the salespeople is like, okay, I need to approach, 20 new prospect. For the new prospect, I need to do this amount of activities, and within the week, schedule 1 meeting or 2 meetings, actually. So how does that work for you? Do you have proactively said, hey, I need to get 5 introductions to somebody, I need to get intel on somebody in some shape or form?
Yeah, I would say you can still apply the more traditional funnel to this, where partner teams are typically held accountable to pipeline generation and revenue closed as sourced by partners. And so those metrics are still important, and you should still track them. And you should then understand, of those opportunities, what is the conversion rate, the win rate, so on and so forth. So you should still track it all the same. You're just tagging it as if, just like marketing tags, they came from this webinar, and here's then what happened. To understand the effectiveness, you would do the same for this kind of interaction. And so what I'm enabling my sellers to do today is, in their prospecting work, week over week, they make a set amount of requests to these partners. And this can then be part of that funnel, where if I make 10 requests per, partner, then I can look to have 3 introductions per partner. And that's where you could change the numbers as appropriate, where maybe I need to do 11, maybe I only need to do 3 requests. That will get me to my goal of this number of introductions. So you can create it like a funnel. And so what I'm enabling my sellers to do is, hey, you're doing, these cold emails and this cold outreach week over week. Add this into a part of your cadence where, in our CRM, you click the button to get the introduction. That sends it to the Slack. I'll help manage it. And from there, that's going to, over time, build this funnel for them. And we can, of course, track the effectiveness based on the number of introductions made or the information gathered from intel, so on and so forth. And so, the way that I would operationalize it is aim to get a set amount of introductions based on a set amount of requests, and lump it into all the other activities that you're doing as a seller. Maybe reduce cold calling and cold emailing a little bit, not entirely, but keep it as 10, 15, 20% of your outreach strategy, and that will then start to build the funnel. And again, you can track it from there.
That's really nice. And because you're in the game for longer time than most of us, can you see already the numbers? Like if you go outbound sales, what are the conversions? And if you go via introductions, what are the conversions? And you're still tackling the same ICPs, right?
Yeah, I would say that in general, we have some data on this for Reveal, because again, the technology facilitates this interaction from like which account do you actually ask for an intro for. And the data that we talk about is 2 times the average revenue when selling with partners, a 43% increase in the average win rate, and the deal sizes are 41% larger as well. There are some other metrics in terms of the longevity of the client for every integration that a client has, which can be, in your formal partnership, that increases the retention of that revenue by, it's about 13% or so. So the propensity to renew and also to upsell is increased with partners. And there's effectively every metric across the business that will be impacted, from the marketing reach that you get to the leads generated to the demos created to the average deal size, like I talked about, and then also on the other side after conversion. So those are some of the stats, but it's amplifying everything that's already being done, as I mentioned before.
And why is not everybody using it yet? Then would you say?
I would say it's not as easily understood. So the barrier that we see with a lot of sellers is, for the last, call it 10, 15 years, sellers were working on this predictable revenue model where they think, I just need to do a certain amount of activities that will then turn into a certain amount of opportunities that'll turn into deals. And so the mindset shift is still needed, where a seller was, maybe 30 years ago, the relationship person, but it turned into the activity person. And so now it needs to go back to the relationship person, especially if, again, you're doing those more enterprise level sales. And so it's a mindset shift based on the tactics that worked before, and what a lot of the companies, especially those that are funded, all the VCs, they'll talk about this predictable revenue model. But that is what's being challenged right now. And that's also what I think we'll see in the next 5 years, where right now there's less funding. So there's going to be a forcing function for this mindset shift. And so, it became, I don't want to say easier. I mean, I did sales, and I'm not going to say it was easy, but it became more simplified to do sales, where it was this assembly line mindset, which again simplified it, not necessarily easier, but it's not as simple anymore given the socioeconomic climate. And honestly, it hasn't been formalized as a business process in the past, where those 30 years ago sellers that were relationship based, they just kind of made it happen.
Mhm.
No one really documented the process.
But I would still expect that you would, like, if you take investors or companies, they still want to get some predictability. Like you also give numbers saying, well, this increase, the win rate increases, the deal size increases. So let's say a company goes to Nearbound, they create their motion, and they do it on the relationship. At a certain moment of time, when they embraced it, they still create, I would say, predictable sales methods just based on Nearbound. So I would almost say that you go back probably not to the activity-based approach. You do more and you get more, but in a sense you could say it's the same, because you do more relation and you get more output.
Yeah, it's still, and that's where I think this model takes a step in that direction, where it is formalizing the process and the tracking to make it more predictable, because the reason that businesses turned away from it in the past was because there was a more predictable model, but that predictable model is becoming harder to scale. And now there is more of that formalization of the process. So what we need is, more conversations like this, and also more templates, more success stories, and all of that, of people actually doing it. And there are some examples out there, but it's still a minority of businesses that are doing it, and that's why there's less people who have adopted it at this time.
I like this vision, that 10 years, 15 years ago, pretty much what was the outreach business and sales loves business about was let's formalize what the best BDRs do, right? Then put it into the cadence, because the best BDRs were using more of the touches and more of the channels, and then somehow by gut feeling they evaluated what works best for them, and then start re-evaluating. So you start measuring everything: open rate, click rate, and should I use more of the emails or LinkedIn's? And the same is could be pretty much the same with Nearbound, right? You take the best salespeople who could be known in the communities, who could have those introductions, and you just start mapping what do they do on a daily basis? How come that they became so networked and get so much introduction and so much intel on the companies around them, and then you're bringing again into the sales routines.
And
Yeah,
I think also, Jacob, what you're saying is that like some salespeople will be better in Nearbound than others, because it's still people business in a sense. Huh? It's not just the mapping; it's also the way how you
That's true.
ask for your introductions, the way how you gather your intel. What do you get out of it? Like, so that's also an interesting part. Will it create a bit of a different breed of salespeople here, or are we going back to where the salespeople were just the relation and let's say the relation people, the consultants, people to people?
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope, at least. And I think, when you formalize the idea of building a network and building trust and relationships, it inherently has to focus on that relationship piece, because you can't just build trust en masse by doing activities per se. It'll be important, but it'll definitely bring a new breed. And that's the hope as well.
Yeah, so it's not just get a tool. If I simplify it,
Yep,
and then
right.
hit the magic button, and then you're good to go. It would be ideal for you guys, for example, but it doesn't work like that. But I definitely understand that solutions definitely help at least streamline the process of account mapping, for example, and or relation mapping.
Yeah, and that's where methodologies are super important. And I think that's why companies who are standing out today are the ones who are helping the market in more than just what their technology can do. They're doing things, I'm biased obviously, but like what nearbound.com is, which is, an extension of the business to educate more than just technology. And it helps build that network and those relationships as well.
Great.
Cool. Guys, I think we're slowly running out of the time. So I think, is there any, I would go through a quick recap, what we discussed. And then if there's anything additional you would like to add to the discussion, feel free, or somebody from the audience who is listening to us. So we discussed how the world is changing, the sales world, more of the people, more of the businesses, economy slows down, more of the emails out there, and we have to change the strategies. Nearbound is pretty much back to basics, where the warm introduction from somebody who is respected by the potential customer is the best way you can go. You pretty much describe that also in impressive numbers, which you can get afterwards. So by 40% higher win rate, deal size, it's just impressive. If you apply it to the pipeline, then you just need half of the salespeople to deliver the same amount of the revenue. And we also discussed few of the strategies that you use. One of them was for the introduction, which is we all know as a salespeople that if we have some happy customer, if we have somebody to ask for the introduction, for the referral, but let's be honest, still 90% of the salespeople don't do that. Or it could be also collect the information before you get to the customer from people who are inside of the organization, which is also very powerful, because that's what, especially if you talk to economic buyers, that's what they love, that you did your research, you talk to many people, and then you go to them and you already know what is happening in the organizations, and you streamline the discussion. So it's not very broad. And the last thing, we also discuss that it could be the salespeople should be more aware of not to stay alone and do the outbound sales, but also look at the shortcuts. Hey, who can introduce me? Where's the community I can be part of that will increase my relevance in front of my customers? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
The main thing that I always think about is like this way of selling is where you're not any longer selling on hard mode. You know, it used to be easy to do the way of traditional selling and outbound, but this is when you see the results, your mind opens up to, wow, that was so easy. Instead of doing 12 to 16 touches to reach this person, one email was sent, they responded to it immediately, and now I have, you know, a meeting with the decision maker. That is the North Star, and it's going to help sellers to, you know, ultimately hit their quotas, get paid, and, you know, that at the end of the day is
live happy.
Yeah, be happy. That's right.
Live happy ever after.
And yeah, it's truly. I'll leave everyone with this idea that I mentioned throughout the talk today, where it is about the customer and their world. They are your boss, and if you're not treating them with that level of respect and the desire to urgently bring them this value that surrounds them, then you're going to add to the noise, and they're not going to want to buy what you have. And definitely that's because they won't listen to what you say. And so if you treat them like you need to understand their world to truly bring them a solution, then you'll be that consultative seller that everyone, you know, should strive to be, and everyone wants to be sold to with that consultative seller. Then you're going to deliver value. And again, they're your boss. They're the ones that ultimately pay your salary. So treat them like that.
Amen. For that.
Here. Great.
Cool. Will, Bart, thank you very much for being here on this webinar with me. Thank you also to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, who came to listen to us. Some of them will have their day ahead on which come from US or Canada. We're luckier ones in Europe. We're just about to finish. So yeah, and definitely you can follow us on LinkedIn, and we're gonna be. This is a series of webinar every month. We go with a different speaker on a different topic, but everything is related to successful sales strategies and sales leaders playbooks. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. See you. I think we can leave the show.